welcome back to NHL Tonight. This tweet from Darren Dreger of TSN. The Canes have certainly spiced things up. In early July, some close to Kotkaniemi predicted he had played his last game with the Canadiens following a healthy scratch in the Stanley Cup Final. Trades seem more likely, but Carolina has taken a far more entertaining approach. And we love entertainment. You said earlier on the call we are in the entertainment business. So for our purposes in the offseason, we kind of like this drama. As a GM in the NHL, you may not like this drama. We'll see what Marc Bergevin does up in Montreal. Has a week to respond to the offer sheet by Don Waddell and the Carolina Hurricanes. But that got us thinking about some of the more infamous offer sheets we've seen in NHL history and certainly some of the bigger names that have been involved in some of these. We'll start with a huge one. Brendan Shanahan, back in the day, offer sheet. St. Louis Blues, you can see, 1991. It was a 3-year term, $3.1 million. Was it matched by New Jersey? No. But an independent arbitrator comes in and awards the New Jersey Devils, one of the greatest defensemen in NHL history, in Scott Stevens. Do you guys remember this one? And what was your reaction then? And what was your reaction now, based on how everything played out? I mean, both guys involved. Hall of Fame caliber.
That's exactly right. You had a couple Hall of Famers. You had a couple things that were being discussed around this time that had to do with potential tampering and things like that. There wasn't really as much full disclosure back then as there is today. And lo and behold, Scott Stevens ends up going the other way, which obviously worked out to be incredible for the New Jersey Devils. And Brendan Shanahan went on and played great. I just think there was a lot more to
the compensation, though, is tough. I mean, you weren't expecting to lose Scott Stevens, one of the best defensemen in the last 25 years, as compensation for the signing of Shanahan. But there's a big-name players going after Shanny with that kind of offer sheet. $3 million back in '91 was a big, big, big number.
It was huge. It was huge. The story is that some information might have been left in St. Louis that was turned over by a new owner, and it ended up penalizing the club significantly. There might have been, I think, Joe Smith in Minnesota Timberwolves, when there was a little bit of a tampering.
The paper shredder after that, after that transaction was done.
So that was a very peculiar one, to say the least.
How about this next one? Joe Sakic could have been a New York Ranger if it wasn't for the Avalanche matching that offer sheet. Here's the details. Before we get to that, look at the flow. Are you kidding me?
Gorgeous.
The hair, Floby Kenobi. Joe back in the day.
Off and warm up for Joe.
1997. The offering team was the Rangers, as we mentioned, 3 years at $21 million. It was matched by Colorado. The annual salary of $2 million. Front-loaded, though. So
this
put
is the
Colorado
kicker.
in a very tough financial position, but I'd say it worked out for the Avs in the long run, getting to keep their eventual general manager.
And this is where the interesting stuff starts happening, because it's not just about the $7 million a year that they were going to pay him, because Joe Sakic was going to be worth around that number in Colorado and New York and anywhere. The question was the $15 million signing bonus and trying to put the squeeze on the Avalanche and the ownership group to say, yeah, you might want him, but do you want to cut a check? And do you have a check to cut for $15 million as soon as you decide to match? And that's where it got a little bit stickier for the Colorado Avalanche. And the Rangers back then, remember, no salary cap. They could spend it any way they wanted. They could have a $100 million salary cap or salaries on their team without a cap, and other teams would be down at 30 or 40.
Some teams practically did. They made it to the 90s for sure. But in Joe Sakic's case, this was the genesis or the origination of how you see these front-loaded signing bonuses, which eventually would be addressed by the NHL. But this is the very, very early stages of it. I remember thinking that was massive at the time, like unimaginably massive. Obviously, it was a great move by Colorado. What we've learned from then is that everybody that's tried to pull the wool over someone's eyes with an upfront signing bonus hasn't really worked.
No. It might
not when the contract makes sense.
When the actual number, they might not like matching at that moment, but they find a way to do it because they realize at $7 million, if that's what you're going to average it out at, that makes sense.
You think Kotkaniemi's looking at that one, $15 million signing bonus, the $20 signing bonus?
What happened to
on the table right now.
I got the short end.
Apples to oranges. We'll see how that one plays out. All right, we'll continue through the history books here. How about Dustin Penner, the offer sheet from the Edmonton Oilers, 2007, 5 years, $21.5 million. Was it matched by Anaheim? No. What do you guys remember from this one?
I remember a rather boisterous, perturbed Brian Burke over this. And obviously, Berkey did take it well. At one point, it almost came to blows. At least that's what was recorded in Berkey's book.
Was it not a challenge to fight in the barn with Kevin Lowe for having done this?
That's exactly what it was. It obviously didn't go over that well, but everybody does accept that this is within the rules.
Which is so funny, though, because Brian Burke is a bright guy.
Yes.
We know this.
Okay.
We know it's part of the rule book. Why is he so offended?
Only one reason, because he... and I'll just...
Because he's Brian Burke?
No, not because he's Brian Burke. Berkey texted me this morning, so he's probably watching now. But in any event, he was upset, as I recall. I don't want to put words in his mouth. He never got a heads up on it. That's all. Now, do you have to do that? No, you do not. Should you do it? Traditionally, before teams get to maybe the offer sheet level, they kind of go through a checklist. And part of that checklist is, hey, rather than just offer sheet the guy, maybe I could call and trade for less than what the compensation will be, or maybe it'll be similar but in a different form. And that's why you make a phone call. Allegedly, that did not happen here.
It seems like these things get so personal sometimes.
Strangely.
Exactly. This next one, huge, and could have been maybe the biggest in NHL history. Shea Weber was not a Philadelphia Flyer. Why? Because the Flyers offered him 3 years at $21 million, and Nashville was like, nope. He's not going anywhere. $7.8 million AAV, total of $68 million in signing bonuses. Sorry, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, that one as well. But of recent offer sheets, this one had the most impact, and the one that your jaw kind of hit the floor of.
Whoa. The dollars involved, they get so big. And I think it's another one of those cases where a big market franchise, Philadelphia, who has maybe more upfront capital to spend all at once or in signing bonuses, takes a look at a smaller market. Now Nashville has actually become a much more financially viable, bigger organization since even that contract was signed, and say, you know what, maybe we can put a squeeze on them to come up with the cash at this moment and take a really good player away from them. Not surprising it was matched, but this was one of those ones, I kind of like the fact they went with it. Like, they tried,
sure,
and it made sense, and the numbers made sense, and the player was of the right age and everything else. This one, there's nothing spiteful about it. It's a good player. He's out there. Let's see if we can't get him.
Right. And this one was the longest of contracts that I could recall, and it actually led to some changes or controls implemented into the salary cap. Good changes in controls. There were other players that were able to utilize that same strategy. Right. Kovalchuk comes to mind, Suter and Parise, a couple other guys, 13-year deals. But in the end, I don't think it's a great strategy, particularly today. The NHL is such big business. These clubs can always find a giant signing bonus.
Yes. Yeah.
If the term, which in Shea's case made sense for him as a player, not just the term, the salary made sense for him as a player, and he was still young enough where you thought maybe the term's a little long, but we could live with it. We can all see what the results have been in that since then. So he's been an incredibly valuable player. It was a good move by Nashville to come up with the signing bonus, match it, didn't work out for Philly.
All right, our last one, Ryan O'Reilly, we remember, offer sheeted by the Calgary Flames back in 2013, just a 2-year deal, so the term not as long, $10 million.
This was strange, though.
Was it matched by Colorado? Yes, he didn't go anywhere. Why was it strange?
Isn't the word.
Well, this was strange because Ryan O'Reilly was in a contract stalemate, trying to find a new deal with Colorado. He had gone overseas and played a couple games in Europe, and part of the rules were if you sign a contract after playing in Europe, you would then have to pass back through waivers before you could join your new team. So the offer sheet by Calgary, they were not even like, he's going to still have to go through waivers before he got back to playing. It was just a peculiar way to have it done. Because then he would have, if it was Calgary he wanted to play for, and it wasn't just about the money, then he might not be able to pick even the place he ended up. It was strange how they matched. He turned into a great player. He's turned into an even better player since then. But just, I remember the conversation around it, trying to sort through the rules, to the point where I think even the parties involved, the clubs, the player, were not entirely sure of how it all was going to play out.
Yeah, just say what it was. Calgary,
it was a miss.
They dropped the ball on
it. It was a big miss.
And they got bailed out by the fact that the offer did get matched, because they would have ended up with no.
Because what would have happened is if he would have gone to Calgary, he would have got put on waivers, claimed by someone else, and Calgary still would have had to pay the compensation
for it.
Back to Colorado.
Right.
Could you imagine?
It was incredible.
It was
wild.
It's
one of the bigger blunders. It got buried Fortunately for the staff that was running Calgary at the time,
thank
we won't
goodness.
name names, but it got buried in the end because it was matched.
It all just kind of swept under the rug, forget about it.
Everybody kept going forward, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of things over the history of the game that have been missed, more than people probably realize. Rafalski, Madden, those names come to mind about different deadlines and how things have to be handled. There are procedures. I don't think you'll see that very much in the future. These teams are so good now.
I remember working that night at the NHL Network and going, I can't believe this. What's happening? Am I understanding this properly?
It's fun in the offseason. It seems so taboo, yet fans kind of root for it because we root for chaos. Do you think this trend continues? I mean, between maybe Carolina and Montreal again next summer, who knows? But
I mean, you were the GM. Like,
sure.
I always like to pretend to be a GM, and I would use it whenever I saw fit.
Yes.
And wherever it made sense. And even if I don't get the player, if it puts that other team into a tough spot financially, or they have to pay someone else a little bit more and takes them out of the trade, whatever.
Yeah, we
it's
never
a bit of
you
advantage.
those relationships as a general manager going forward.
You have to manage your relationships, and there is some etiquette involved. But, I could tell you for a fact there was a player that we wanted. I relayed this story to you guys earlier, Andre Mazzaros, and he wasn't signed by Ottawa. I begged Brian Murray, God bless him, to sign the player and get it done quick because I knew our ownership group wanted to sign him. He never could get him signed. Eventually, rather than have me make an offer sheet, which I said I would do, we worked out a trade.
Right.
And that's part of the process. And I called Brian numerous times before that and said, look, would you please sign this guy? Because otherwise I'm going to have to make an offer sheet. Right. And that went on for weeks before, one day I said, well, I'll give you draft picks. And he said some crazy remark about, I'm a certain age, what am I going to do with draft picks? And I laughed. And he said, let's just work out a trade. And that's exactly what we did.
All right.
I wish we saw more of it.
Yeah,
and maybe it wasn't taken so personally.
And they don't, usually they don't go through. But
everybody's nervous now because of what just happened.
Yeah, maybe even more going to try to do this because of the retaliatory nature of Carolina.
No matter who you are, Johnny, no matter how well you manage your cap,
you're going to find yourself vulnerable one day?
There will come a time one day where you're nervous.
Yeah.
I'll offer sheet in our fantasy league. How's that?
I like it.